Welcome to the program's dialogue. This is a series of events in preparation of the Clean Energy Transition Partnership, one of the partnerships under preparation for Horizon Europe, the new framework program for research and development. This series of events is facilitating a dialogue between ERANETs with their successful formats and with their experiences of the last 10 years and national program owners and program managers. The event series is hosted by the joint programming platform Smart Energy Systems. Please be aware that the events are provided on our YouTube channel as a live stream and as a recording, resulting in the fact that whatever you contribute in the chat or via live talk will be public. The Clean Energy Transition Partnership is going to be a transnational joint programming initiative to boost and accelerate the energy transition, building upon regional and national RDI funding programs. Therefore, the program's dialogue intends to create joint knowledge about the most powerful and successful formats and tools to promote research, technology development, and innovation. In a mutual learning and capacity building exercise, we want to learn about good practices, successful activities, effective approaches, but also about the things we tried to do and that did not work out. For this, we want to create together with you an open and interactive atmosphere. The dialogue events are organized in a SureFix mode every Friday at 11 a.m. on this YouTube channel. Each event will present one or a group of initiatives, and we have already a dense schedule until mid-March. However, if you want to present your program or initiative and you are not on the list yet, please let us know and we will find a slot for you. Each of the events will have the same format of presentation blocks of about 10 to 15 minutes, highlighting a specific topic or aspect, followed by a question and answer and discussion session of about 10 minutes. If you have a question, please use the chat function in the YouTube channel. We will bring it up. You want to get on stage and discuss live with the speakers? Send your request in the chat. We will bring you up on stage. The process to develop the Clean Energy Transition Partnership has come a long way. We have started with a stakeholder groups dialogue with all the SETPlan initiatives and ERANETs, developing thematic RDI challenges in spring and summer last year. Based on these inputs in a country's dialogue, the Strategic Research and Innovation Agenda was developed and launched in a SETPlan conference side event in November 2020. Now we want to bring together all the partners, funding institutions, ministries, program managers and program owners that are ready to contribute to the implementation of this new joint programming initiative. The number of countries and regions joining has been growing and growing over the last months, and there are still new partners coming on board. A great core team of enthusiastic experts from different organizations all over Europe is committed to bring this initiative forward. Enjoy the program's dialogue, and now let us introduce the speakers of today. Yes, hello everyone. Welcome on this Friday again. We had a little bit of a break the last weeks, but we are back again today. In our last couple of events of this series, we are focusing on the question, what does it mean for a funding program in the field of energy innovation to be mission-oriented or challenge-driven. We had some examples from Austria at our last event, and today we are very pleased to have guests from Netherlands, from the Netherlands Enterprise Agency with us, and our speakers of today will be Gerdy Brembroek, Otto Berndsen, and Joost Koch. Welcome, everyone. Gerdy, as always, will act also in a double role as a co-moderator of mine, and we are unfortunately missing our third co-moderator, Fredrik Lundström from the Swedish Energy Agency today, because he is in an important internal meeting, but will try to join later. So, good morning and welcome, everybody. Thanks for taking the challenge and for being ready to present your approaches from the Netherlands, how you approach this topic of challenge-driven or mission-oriented programming. Otto and Joost, as Gerdy and me are already quite well known to our audience, I think maybe a couple of minutes on your personal background. You are both working at the Netherlands Enterprise Agency. Is that correct? And what's your technical or educational background, and in which field are you working?
Shall I start?
Please.
My name is Joost Koch. I work for the Dutch enterprise of the Netherlands Enterprise Agency. I'm not used to talk English that much. I'm more on a national level, working on a national level. But I work in the same team as Gerdy and Otto, and my function is more about policy advice. I have a background in both technology as policy science, so I'm just on that crossroads of those two topics.
Thanks, Joost.
Right, I'm Otto Berndsen. I'm happy to be here with my colleagues and address you on the Dutch situation. I have a background in IT systems and was trained as an anthropologist in the beautiful high mountains of South America. And I'm also very much involved in the international networks, not just in Europe, but also the International Energy Agency, specifically in solar and smart grid systems. It's like you, Michael.
Thank you very much for this introduction. Otto, as an anthropologist, I think you are the right person to help building this big animal, the Clean Energy Transition Partnership, because it's all about people, as always.
It's about people. It's about different perspectives.
Yeah.
It's about diversity. Yeah.
Great. Thanks and cool to have you here. Our first session, and let's jump into this first topic, is dealing with the basic question, okay, how do we come? I mean, we have these approaches in many countries now that we want to have more challenge-driven, mission-oriented programs. And so how does it come that we come to this approach? How does it come that you in the Netherlands came to this approach? So the first session is dedicated to the Dutch context of the energy transition in your country and the mission-oriented programming approach. Who is going to start?
I'm going to start.
Great. Gerdy, please.
Okay, thank you very much, Michael. Yes. Also welcome from me. Sorry. My name is Gerdy Brembroek from Netherlands Enterprise Agency, and I'm here with my colleagues from the Energy Innovation team, as has been introduced before. And I'm going to talk about, or we're going to bring the story of the MOI instrument. And this is the mission-driven research, development and innovation program that has been launched last year in the Netherlands. So we're starting with a bit of context. What is it? What is the challenge in the Netherlands, and how did this program come into life, so to speak? Of course, the Netherlands is a low country at the estuaries of 4 major rivers, needing a lot of energy, with a high population density of 4 times more than EU average, with a high specific CO2 emissions per capita, and also with a rather lagging energy production from renewables. We have 8.8 in 2019, while nearly 20% was EU average at that time, and the renewables share in Netherlands was at that time 18% for electricity and only 7% for heating and cooling. So there are challenges, and if you're looking at the right-hand side of this slide, you see a graph with CO2 equivalent emissions of the Netherlands per energy sector. For electricity in the dark green, for industry, for the built environment in yellow, for mobility and agriculture, both measured and forecasted, because you see that the graph extends from 1990 till 2030. And there's also an arrow there at the right-hand side, and it indicates the aim of our national climate agreement of minus 49% by 2030. And you can easily see from the graph that this is really a challenge. This whole story, it started from the coalition agreement in 2017, when the incoming government, that is now the outgoing government, decided that they would, for innovation, proceed with a top sector policy that was also embraced in the previous coalition, and for climate change, that they would really step up the challenge and have a goal of 49% CO2 emissions reduction in 2030. And they also stipulated in the coalition agreement that there would be a national agreement on climate change. And as you will see later on, this was really an agreement that was that was the basis of, well, I'll come to that later. Sorry about this. First, we are going into the innovation policies that were organized along a top sector policy, which focused on opportunities for the Netherlands. The top sector innovation policy was established in 2012, and it focused on technologies and areas where there were opportunities for the Netherlands. One of these areas was energy. So there is a top sector energy in the Netherlands, which is a public-private partnership. And it is in turn organized in TKIs, top consortia for knowledge and innovation. And it's important to remember these TKIs, because they will come back in the rest of the presentation. These TKIs, these top consortia, were also public-private partnerships and can be really well compared to the ETIPs at European level. What do those top consortia for knowledge and innovation do? They provided programming input for TKI tenders in the years 2013 till 2019. And they also provided input for an integral knowledge and innovation agenda that was established in the year 2018, acting on this government resolution that we would have a climate agreement and go for 49% CO2 emissions reduction. The negotiations for the climate agreement involved the top sectors. They were providing input to the knowledge and innovation part of these negotiations. And this knowledge and innovation part resulted in a knowledge and innovation agenda for climate and energy. And the interesting part is that it's a sectorial approach. We have 5 missions formulated on reduction of CO2 in 2050 for electricity, for the built environment, for industry, for mobility, and for agricultural and nature system, and a cross-cutting challenge for a robust and societally acceptable energy system. However, this is still broken down into 13 multi-annual mission-driven innovation programs and more than 60 innovation topics. What happened at the same time with the National Climate Agreement? This was a negotiation between very many stakeholders from all stakeholders that are present in the Netherlands society, from the Association of Homeowners till the Association of the Large Industry, and also also the NGOs were negotiating with those parties to come to an agreement that would be acceptable and have and be acceptable to all these stakeholders. And this led, in the end, to a climate agreement that is now a policy agenda that encompasses both agreements on implementation, the implementation side of things. How do we transition from now till 49% emissions reduction in 2030? What instruments do we need? What can we agree to do? While the energy transition will also be affordable, fair and achievable. And so the purpose of the innovation in the climate agreement is to reduce costs of energy system components as well as systems, speed up the introduction of new energy systems options before 2030 as a precondition for upscaling between 2030 and the 95 CO2 emissions reduction in 2050, which is which is obsolete now, but will be, but was the reality in the climate agreement. You can also read the climate agreement, the link to the English text you can find on this slide. It's important to realize that this is a societally accepted and agreed upon strategy, and this is important because innovation and energy market policy instruments should be aligned. If there's no need for innovation, it doesn't make real sense, and certainly not if you're dealing with challenges that are really nearby to think much about innovation. So the point of this slide here is to show that it's a puzzle where the need for innovations and the supply for innovations should fit well together. A market prospect is needed to get innovations going. So this is the end of my contribution about the context. We're having huge challenges. We have, as a background of the MOI regulation, a policy document that addresses both implementation and innovation, a sectoral approach, and open for questions.
Thank you very much, Gerdy, for this first insight and the framework that we are working in here, that you're working in here. Very interesting to understand the challenges and also the structures. It also shows that this, what you showed, I think, at the end, need-driven somehow approach, and so technology push and need pull on the other hand side is an important topic that that we all have to deal with, I think, in our countries, but also on the European level, and which maybe is a very an important force towards the mission-oriented approach. I was interested in, and maybe I can use the time for one question. The TKIs, the top sector energy, these groups, as I understand, is it something similar that we sometimes call technology platforms or something like this? In Austria, we have also such structures, maybe that are comparable, but I try to understand if it's the same. So is it mainly industry groups that are sitting together there, or together with research? What is the combination there?
Yes, well, exactly that. It's the combination of industry and research.
Yeah.
So what I was saying, it's a bit comparable to what the ETIPs are on the European
Yeah.
level.
Very
And they're
interesting.
quite sectorally organized. As you can see on the slides, there's one on bio-based, there's one on offshore wind, but there's also one on urban energy, which is, of course, at a sectoral level already. So already that's not what I intend to say. There are sectorally organized TKIs, but also TKIs that are focusing more on a specific area of technology.
And who is providing the framework for those? I mean, is that also you as an agency working together with them? Are you providing the kind of framework or platform for them, or is it something that is decentralized or organized by the different sectors? Or are you also supporting their work, or is it something that comes from the different sectors?
No, we're also supporting the work. We're supporting the work with secretarial services, and also we have supported these tenders, of course, as a funding organization. We were the organization that handled the tenders that were put in place in consultation between the ministries, the top sector energy, and these groups. Maybe Otto and Joost, you can add something to this.
No, I think you said it exactly correct. So we are in a narrow collaboration with the TKIs on all kind of issues like programming, or but also doing research besides the technology projects, like um, how do you say it? Studies about the market share of something, or in the future analysis. They if they come with some need for different research, then we together look for means to do this.
Yeah. I would just like to address a question in the chat by Susan Meyer. It's about the funding. If I remember correctly, at the start of the TKIs, it was part of a major budget cost operation. But recently, with the climate accord and redefinition of the goals, the amounts of money have increased again. So it was originally a budget cut, and now it's receiving major amounts of fresh money. To quote Susan.
It's both. It's the redirected money, and it's fresh money.
Yeah.
Yes, of course, this climate agreement, it's a major thing in the Netherlands. It is important to realize that it has really been signed by all kind of organizations that have contributed also to establishing the climate agreement. And I know only of one organization that didn't sign it, that was Greenpeace. So that's...
Okay.
But it was not ambitious enough for them. So this was, well,
That was the reason.
that's my summary of the thing. Of course, they need to talk for themselves if you want to hear the entire story. But I think that this is it will do as a summary.
Okay, very interesting. We have another 3 minutes, I think, for questions that we could take up.
Yes, maybe Joost, we have been talking in the time that we were preparing this meeting about the difference that we somehow saw when the climate agreement was negotiated between the stakeholder directions and expectations from innovation versus the input that came from these TKIs. Do you want to say to share some observations on that?
Well, in practice, the two agendas were worked on it on a parallel mean of how do you say it? It's they worked on both agendas together, but there were some interaction between the agendas and the people who worked for those agendas. But if you see the results of the two, then you see a lot of similarity, but you see also some differences in the vision on innovation. But well, I come to that in my presentation.
Okay.
So well, not everything was entirely how do you say it? Aligned. Not every discussion was aligned because there were so many things happening at the same time in different rooms, different chambers, different people who were talking on the climate agreement and also on the innovation agenda. So that there is some room, but well, that's always the question, I think.
Yes, if you want to iron out all differences, you will never come to anything.
Exactly.
So you need to be pragmatic as well and take steps instead of focus too much on all the you have to take steps and see where it brings you.
Exactly. Nicely put.
Okay, maybe we should move over to our second session, presentation session, and this is presented by Joost Koch, and it's about the challenge-driven programming, about the MOI that Gerdy also mentioned already in the introduction.
Okay. Well, let's start. First, I want to introduce something about what do we mean by a mission-driven innovation policy? Because there's a lot of different views on that. And for my presentation, I used this definition or this highlights in the definition of what's about mission-driven innovation policy. And for you and for the next slides, the most important things are bold. So I want to take you on the directionality that is needed to activate and align the innovation efforts of broad ranges of stakeholders and the role of the government in it. And what does it mean and how do we engage significantly more stakeholders than just the one we know in the policy agenda we had the last 10 years. So, and of course, it's my presentation is only on the question, how do we do that? Because this is a theoretical definition, and how do we do that in practice in the Netherlands? Now, like Gerdy also mentioned, there is a large agenda, and you see an infographic at the left side of the slide, in which we see the whole policy mix of the Department of Internal Affairs on the energy transition in the built environment. And I want to focus on the two main topics mentioned in this infographic and in this climate agreement, which are interesting for innovation. And you see this on the right side. It's about cheap and smart renovation, and it's about switching from natural gas to sustainable heating. And you see the topics below that. Is it about improving existing technologies? Is it about developing new technologies? But also talent education, etc., etc. Well, the first thing is, how do we do this? And what I learned in mission innovation is you have to embrace complexity. So the first discussions we had as an agency with the departments and with the TTI Urban Energy was, do we focus on what they call type 1 problems or moon problems, or how to improve existing technology or develop new technologies, or should we level up in complexity and focus on how to integrate solutions, this or even another way up, not only focus on how to innovate or how to get new integrated solutions, but also work on social change, because the built environment, to get rid of the natural gas in the built environment in Holland is a complex, very complex challenge. It's not only technology; it's also about social, about fairness of the transition, and can it be achieved? Well, if you look at this scheme, it looks very much at the scheme you use in the pyramid I've seen, and also you can see that the same discussion here. Is it on about key enabling zero emission technologies, or should we focus on energy supply, or even at local energy systems? And this slide will give you some example of what we did exactly. Here you see the subsidy schemes or the programs in 2019, and you see here that the sectors were in charge. That's the main focus. The main focus of the government was on the 5 TKIs and their initiatives. And you also see that in the built environment, we had almost 6 budgets, 6 schemes on almost 8 topics. And you also see on the top side only small budgets. And that was the situation before we went to before the mission innovation started. And this slide shows you what the result was of the discussion about giving some direction on innovation, on a more social level of innovation. And you see that we went from now, like I said, from 4 almost 6 budgets and 8 topics to one big budget of $27 million euro, and only 3 main topics. And because of this, there is more room to address complexity for the consortia who want to innovate. They don't have to give in front, is it on solar or is it on heat pumps? But there's room to address more complex projects in practice. The next thing we did, of course, is the formulation of the societal innovation goal, or I should say objective of the program. And as you can see, we want to not only contribute to cost reduction or affordable, but we also give attention to fairness and achievable. And like you see on the right side, you see the 3 main topics mentioned as an objective of the program. And maybe also we need to mention that it has to be applied in the Netherlands before 2025, because the budget comes from the climate agreement, and the climate agreement has an objective of a goal on 2030. So you can innovate, but you have to deliver in 2025. Next question was about getting more stakeholders engaged. Now, we did it in the way you see on this slide. We limited the global cost of research organizations to max 65% of the total cost. And we also asked, or we asked for a minimum of 3 companies in a consortium, and give room to some other activities besides purely technological innovation. So you can do some other research also. This makes multidisciplinary collaboration possible in this kind of projects. Well, this the result of this all was the you see here in this evolution proposal in the evolution of the proposals. You see the criteria and the scores. On the criteria, we ask we check the proposals, and I want to mention especially the weight. You see the contribution to the objective of the program and the quality of the consortium gives you almost 50% of the points you can score. So this, in this way, we want to highlight this social objective and a broad consortium of people, of stakeholders, to implement the project. Well, that was my contribution. I'm ready.
Thanks a lot, Joost. That was very interesting, particularly also the kind of grouping of kind of innovations you made, and understood that this is also reflected in the pyramid that was drafted in the SRIA process of the CETP. Very interesting. I think it also is reflected in the two different kind of challenges that we have identified in the SRIA for the CETP. What I did not really get is how you structured your programs. I understood, or your calls. First, the calls were more technology structured, so from the different TKI groups. But what was the structure then? What kind of? I didn't get the headlines. Is it then that you structured it along concrete challenges, or what was the kind of grouping? Can we go back to this slide again? I don't know.
You mean this slide or the next one?
Yeah, this one and the next one, because this is the one, right? This was in the times before, so it was more like in the traditional way we all did it along the different technologies, right? And then, what was the next one?
Well, this as you can see, this technology driven. You see this especially when bioenergy or gas or offshore wind.
Yeah.
But in the environment, you see this also as solar energy, infrastructure. This is me. This practice. This was almost all about the heat pumps, and the two on the bottom, they were in between. So you can see it's also on the title of the subsidy scheme. This was the first time we experimented with a more long-term mission-driven focus than we did in this. So this is a more like a hybrid scheme. In between the old, this was the old way we did it. This was an experiment for something new.
Yeah.
And it resulted in this scheme. And you see also in the industry, we don't have all the subtopics anymore, but we only focus at main topics. And it's about building renovation and not on solar or heat pumps. You can use them, but you have to. Your project has to do with the integration of all these kind of technologies in a working environment.
See your point.
Maybe just to add something, these programs were sectoral, really. We have a MOI for built environment, one for industry, one for electricity generation, according to those sectors that we've seen in the climate agreement as well. It's organized along those lines. Only there's no MOI for mobility and no more for nature and agriculture. So that's a clarification. I think that I think it's also good to realize that this is indeed the instrument for industrial research and the development phase, and that we also have separate instruments for supporting pilots and demonstrations in the Netherlands. They've always enabled a broad scope of demonstration projects. They were less restricted in what they could fund.
Yeah.
Yep.
There are some questions in the chat as well.
Yeah, maybe Nicolas can help with this.
What was the reason to limit funding to research organization to 65%? Well, that was the main topic last year, I think, especially for the research organizations. We want projects, research and development projects with more, how do you say it?
But does it mean that the rest of the money has to come from the industry partners? Right?
Yes, exactly. And therefore we want to be sure that there was a need for this kind of projects, and we want to.
It's the overall funding. It's not just that the research organizations themselves cannot be funded or cannot be financed by 100% in the project, but the overall there has to be
Yeah,
a contribution
of course, yes,
from the industry.
Yeah.
Yes, that's correct.
Yes.
So max 65% of the subsidy can go to research organizations.
Of the total amount of the project, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's the good.
And it's just to add on that, it's not just industry. In some of the projects we'll get later to, you'll see contributions from other governments, lower governments like provinces,
Yeah.
municipalities.
Because they also can be somehow seen as need owners or the ones that
Yes.
will have to
Yes.
asking for solutions. Cool.
Yes.
We have another question from Beatrice, I see. How do you organize the evaluation, taking into account the broad range of areas of topics and the broad knowledge that is to be covered? Is there a difference to before?
I will come to that in my next presentation on
cool.
monitoring.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Very good.
That's the easy answer. Yes.
Yeah, this is also an interesting question. The selection of projects is related to technology readiness levels and how can non-technological projects be funded? The answer is that projects need to be a mix, in my perspective. They can, their main activity needs to be innovation and
technological innovation in a sense, right?
Yeah. But there's also room for other project activities. There is a technology readiness level attached to the innovation that the consortium is working on, or rather the set of technologies that the consortium is working on, because it's a larger group that is also interacting with need owners. So there will be no non-technological projects. It will be integrated projects where the non-technological parts are an integral part of the project plan. That would be my answer to Klaus. Thank you very much for the question. Any additions to that, Joost or Otto?
No, we'll explain that in the following presentations. I just want to go back to a question by Suzanne that about the budgets. An important trend is that many more ministries got involved into funding projects in climate change. Before it was just the Ministry of Economic Affairs, basically, and now we have, I think, at least 5 or 6 ministries as a customer, you might say.
Okay. So what are the other ministries? Like
internal affairs.
Yeah.
Agriculture.
And
infrastructure. And
okay, there's a known.
Foreign affairs.
That makes it clear. Yeah. Okay. Understand. I have another question that is more content related. As I saw, there is you're sometimes focusing on electricity or electricity systems. How do you see that the issue of sector integration or this what we call the integrated regional energy systems in our joint programming initiative? What role does it play? I mean, not only because you can look at it from a perspective of the electricity grid to say, okay, we need some flexibility in the other systems, but you can also look on it on a more holistic approach where you say, okay, there are parts that will be solved by electricity, there will be parts that might be solved by other carriers. Is electricity really seen as a main energy carrier in the Netherlands for the future? Does it play a specific role? Or how do you look upon this topic of the sector integration?
Well, perhaps it's more for Otto, but he's more about system integration. But it's a topic in the Netherlands, and nowadays we got a lot of natural gas, as you know, and our main energy system is based on natural gas, especially in the built environment. So there is an issue or getting the built environment on the heat networks or on all electric, but also on hydrogen instead of the natural gas.
Mm-hmm. So, and you're covering this more or less under the general topic of built environment, right?
Yes, it's more about, there is a real big program in the Netherlands. It's called Regional Energy Systems.
Mm-hmm.
So we divided the the Netherlands in I think 30 regions,
Mm-hmm.
and there is all kind of people are getting together, all the stakeholders getting involved to set up some vision and strategy to integrate at the regional level the energy system.
Did I get that? 30, you said?
Yeah, 30.
And
I think.
can they be considered as kind of living labs or real labs or something like this?
No,
or?
It's more about policy.
More policy. Okay.
Yes, it's about getting.
But it has no relation or direct relation to an innovation program or so. So it's about the regional policies, and then yeah.
Well, not yet, but there are. Well, as I show you, we want to move up at the pyramid. So we want to introduce more. We have some more and more projects, but Otto will tell you more about it on the local integration of all kinds of energy elements or energy systems, even systems, the electricity system and the heat system,
the
local level. Yeah.
Okay, so there it comes.
Well,
exactly.
I hope. I
see your point.
I've seen the projects he will show, and I think one is in this kind of area, but I'm not sure about.
And under which topic or so did they evolve? I mean, did they come from also from this building environment focus or even other programs?
Now there is two ways: the built environment focus, but also the last years from the industry, because if they have to scale up, they need infrastructure on electricity or hydrogen or something else. So there's a lot of debate about the alignment of industrial projects and infrastructure projects. The chicken egg problem, and how do you do that in general?
Yeah. Maybe we can take a last question from the audience from Wim Sinke. So the question is, will you participate with this program also in the CETP, or is it others?
Well, I can talk about that one, because that's a puzzle that we are still developing. We know that we can easily. We intend to participate in the Clean Energy Transition Partnership, at least with the demonstration regulations that we have, because they are well suited to match the schedule of the calls that we will have in CETP. Also, we have RVO, which is the research funding organization in Netherlands. They have also indicated interest to join CETP, and they're also present here in this meeting I saw. So welcome. They will also play a role in our funding the participation in CETP, but this leaves open the question, how do we deal with industrial research, that level of the technology readiness level, and this is something that we haven't yet concluded on. So that it's not this program, to be very specific, this program has its own evaluation committee, and we know from experience that it's very difficult and challenging and leading to to disappointment if you have an international committee and a national committee that need to rank a varying set of proposals, and that is something that I would like to avoid if we can. So
understandable, but maybe we can find another level of collaboration. So it depends on how we come out with the design of the CETP, but if we will have maybe at least in some of the transition initiatives something like a knowledge community or so, maybe this could also integrate projects from the national level on this level, so not in the calls, but in the knowledge community and in the knowledge sharing. Maybe that could be interesting.
Interesting idea.
Let's move on in the schedule as it is time for the next session. And I see here that now the next presentation will be from Otto about examples of 100 projects. Okay, you're doing this in 10 minutes. That is per project. Great, Otto, please, the floor is yours.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. Well, I will present just 4 of these MOI projects, integrated projects focusing on social challenges. Next slide, please, Gerdy. And Joost already mentioned it. There are some preconditions, and the most important ones were that it had to be integrated, of course, with a large, at least 3 companies. There was bigger projects, at least 2 million budget of subsidy budget could be allocated up to, if I remember correctly, 5 million. So multidisciplinary projects, and they were mostly divided into 2 areas of operation because these stakeholders, they have to meet somewhere. So we had renewable electricity sources at offshore, at water. We also have lots of inshore water, as you may know in the Netherlands, and at land. And that was apart from the built environment, with lots of overlaps, of course, and heavy industry. So that's how we managed somehow to get a mixture for consortia forming. To give you some context, the Netherlands, the main topic in the Netherlands is land use, I guess. We're a densely populated country at the situated at the estuary or delta of 4 major rivers. So space and the usage, multifunctional usage of space is a constant you will find in the evaluation of all the projects. So with that, the next slide, Gerdy. Sorry for confusing you a little bit there. The first I would like to mention is a good example of integrated projects called Robust, and it addresses the growing congestion in the Dutch electricity grids. They're researching the optimal mixture of grid reinforcement in time and using local flexibility. And local is here a key word, because these sources like electrical vehicles, heat pumps, solar, etc., they are locally owned. So in these projects, you really have to involve the owners, and that means not only energy cooperatives, but also municipalities, etc. And this project is led by the University of Utrecht, but it has 11 partners and many more associates involved. So that's a good example. The next one that is addressing your issue about your question about sector coupling. Imagine that everybody in the Netherlands is connected. All the households are connected to both the electricity grids and the gas. There's a gas infrastructure constructed in the 50s of the last century. So those two are omnipresent. Heating, however, is another question. There are some cities with district heating, but it's very localized. So sector coupling between the gas infrastructure and electricity is very much already a thing, because flexibility at this moment is supplied by gas-fired power plants. That's the major backup facility in the Netherlands. And heating and warming is still a bit separate of that. Well, this project addresses system integration on a higher level concerning heating. It's called Warming Up. It's a large project aimed at sustainable collective heating systems. So the main challenge there, and in the Netherlands in general, is to bridge the seasonal gap we have between summer and winter. Something all Northern European countries are familiar with. But it is especially dire in the Netherlands, because we are gradually turning off the gas the natural gas, and that was a major part. It consisted of more than half of our total energy supply in the past. So that's the major challenge. This is led by TNO, but I would like to, as an example, just show how many partners there are on the next slide. This is just, no, go easy, go to just one back. That's the overview of what we mean by system integration. So you have different levels. At the bottom level, you can see also societal issues, because with heating systems, there's always a problem or an issue with law and regulation, because in our existing energy law, you have the freedom of choice of energy supplier. Now, if you aim at a long-term contract for district heating systems, how do you guarantee that the individual households still have options? So that's something to address. And then you work up through the different technology systems. You can read there: geothermal, underground thermal storage, and the construction of all these systems, aquathermal, and then you have to somehow integrate it in a very intelligent way. And I think that's part of the answer to your first question, Michael, that for managing these complex systems and sector coupling, we need tools. We need different tools for managing demand and supply, and finding where the flexibility is at a certain point in time, of course. Now, Gertie, please, the next one. There you have an overview of the many participants in this warming up project. There are engineering companies, universities, grid operators, and just to show the diversity, on the left you find a picture of it's called Rijkswaterstaat, that's a Ministry of Infrastructure. So they're participating in this project with their own budget, of course, which is it's not a subsidy, but that's a possibility. And we as an agency are also participating sometimes in a project. And on the extreme left, down in the corner, you find the Efteling, and that's a theme park. So that shows how these MOI projects are more integrated, reaching out to owners, stakeholders, and are not. They contain a hardcore of technology companies and universities, but they're reaching out and addressing also the context of the technology in the Netherlands. And I think we'll come back to that. that it's important to have clear what is the exact context of a technology in your respective countries. And that would be the basis of international collaboration and see where we overlap, where we have differences. Next slide, please, Gertie. Then two projects that are a little bit more traditionally focused on technology, but they still have to address societal challenges. The first one is RAPID. It concerns lightweight solar panels. You can easily click and on your roof, and in this way we can also use the surfaces in the Netherlands that would need roof enforcement for the heavier traditional solar panels. They also are cheaper in installation costs. They're much more environmentally friendly, can be recycled completely, and their carbon footprint is much lower thanks to an innovative production process, etc. So they address some of the social challenges. It's led by a company, Solarge, and I think this is a good example how renovation is an excellent opportunity of pooling investments that have to be done anyway, and at the same time greening your old building stock. And Solarge could be part of this. Projects as this one, as RAPID, they can be filed in another project also. That project is called the Renovation Acceleration. That's more about scaling up. So at least 200 or 20 households, buildings, that's the least amount. And then you can scale up to thousands, tens of thousands. The idea here is to pool resources, also with social housing corporations, to address in batches specific types of houses and address those together and in this way reduce costs. Now, then the last one is the project Poseidon. It's more traditionally offshore wind, but in this case it addresses storage offshore with green hydrogen production. Transportation to the land is still something to be researched. And of course, any floating device or offshore is an important option for the Netherlands with its restriction on land use. Now, I wonder, do I have another slide, or Gertie, is there another slide? I think we're done with this one. Okay. So, just in time.
Very good. Yeah, interesting examples. Also impressive, at least that one huge consortium you were showing. I mean, if we're talking about system solutions or integration and so on, then we see that, yeah, a number of different players are in the field that are important in this. Very interesting. I don't have questions at the moment, so I would rather look at the chat or also ask Gerdy if you have some specific questions. Oh, there's one question from Susanne interested in how are you selecting the project? So is the evaluation committee changing from one call to the other, or you have more like a kind of standing committee that is looking also on the evolvement of the projects over time?
Well, I can say something to that. It is, in principle, it's a standing committee, and what is also the situation is that this evaluation committee, it is going through all the proposals together in a meeting. So it's not like three experts look at one proposal and 3 other experts look at another one. It's an integral discussion where experts can also give their input and reconsider their scores through the interaction. But I'm not having a stake in those meetings. So this is a very general answer. Do you have any more to say about that, Otto or Joost?
Well, there are specific committees for different topics.
That's right. Yes, we have a committee for the built environment, and another committee for industry, and another committee for electricity generation.
Right. Shall I address the next question about hydrogen from Klaus?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What is the strategy and roadmap between adding hydrogen to the gas grid? Well, there you have one of the major challenges. First, it's a gradual process. So it's yes, we do fund, of course, projects that do not fully replace gas yet. It's a question of blending. As of 10 years ago, I think the grid operator there started to blend up to 2 or 3% of hydrogen into the existing infrastructure, and always having an eye on safety issues, etc. Adapting the infrastructure within that process. I think we are having projects that target 20% blending, 30% blending, and we're trying to push up that number. Hydrogen is a difficult, very small molecule, so it's. But I think that's one of the things where the experience with the gas infrastructure comes in handy. So the disadvantage we have, the dependency on gas in the terms of in the respect of transport and storage, might become a strength. I hope that will materialize, but we're still very much open also to look at other countries, how they address especially the heating problem in the winter without natural gas resources. That's something we would be very much interested to learn from other countries.
Maybe I can add something because Otto, what you're saying was completely right. Of course, we have been experimenting with blending, but this is not. These are innovation projects. It's not the situation in our country. It's innovation projects that were implemented. There is, of course, a perspective of more use of hydrogen, but there's also a challenge there because hydrogen production, it also requires, well, it's not a process that is, well, you lose something. With every step, you're losing efficiency, and we need to look very carefully into the directions that our energy systems will need. Hydrogen will for sure be part of the mix, but we also need to consider renewables for heating. We need to consider other sources of fuels. So it will be part of the solution.
Yeah, we are all having these discussions in our countries, absolutely. I think looking on the time, we have to move over to the next session presented by Joost Koch. And I think that's a very important topic. Of course, if we want to be, and we also had this in our last event, if we want to be challenge-driven, mission-oriented, we are after some certain development in a certain direction. We want to see that mission to be accomplished, and that means we need to have some kind of monitoring system to see if we are progressing in this direction. And this is about what Joost is going to talk about in the next presentation, progress monitoring. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, in my presentation, it will be short because I just want to set the scene, and let's introduce some examples at this theme we do in Holland. So it will not be a broad setting of how we do it. It's just show some examples of progress monitoring in a more mission-driven way. Well, I want to first show you again the slide on what's mission-driven innovation policy is all about. It's, as you can see in the highlighted or bold topics, it's about direction and about engaging more stakeholders, as shown by Otto in the examples, in the project examples. So I will elaborate on that. Go. Yes. First, about determining which directions for change. We use the EAR guideline of reporting energy R&D, and as you can see on the left side, this is a picture of the subcategories used by the EAR to for energy innovation. And at the left side, you see something we publish every year as an RVO about public investments. And this is the high over. So you see only at the high level of categories in the EAR used, but you see the investments, and you see also the changes there occur. And the most significant is, I think, is it's less about renewables energy sources. There's less investments in solar or offshore wind, and more about energy efficiency, as shown on the blue pillars. And this way we can monitor almost real time on EVO. We monitor every year, every part of the year. We monitor where the money goes, in which direction. And this one is also a slide. It's about the number of projects. It's another way to monitor it, not the amount of money, but on the amount of the number of projects every year. You see, this is a slide only about the built environment. And well, I don't know if you can see it because it's very small, but with the colors you see also the number of projects started in every year. And you see this in the 2018. There was a large number of projects started, even more than all the projects before. And that has to do with more budget from the climate agenda we can use for innovation. And now another perspective, like I said, is which stakeholders are involved. And as shown, you see the stakeholders in the warming up, and like Otto tried to do himself, is give them a position in what we call an innovation ecosystem perspective. This which parties are on the demand side, which parties are on the supply side, which partners come from a research and education background. And this way we can see, like we said, how we succeed in trying to engage more and more stakeholders from the community, instead of only the usual parties we see in terms of research and supply side. And perhaps, I don't know if it's you're familiar with this, it's about building up the ecosystem over time. What you see is because learning networks are very important because they have the potential to support joint learning and collective innovation. We also monitor the development of those kind of networks. And at the left side, you see two examples of the one of the development actor network and one of the demonstration actor network of the built environment in 2019. As shown, you see the nodes, that's the colored circles. They visualize the actors involved. And you see the network of almost 60 projects, which were which were during 2019. The size of the nodes visualize the number of actors with which an actor is connected. Just at the left side, you see some big nodes, and this will be the research institutes because they have many relations with all parties and all actors in the field, and they are crucial to learn, because all the other parties, like you see at the right side in a demonstration network, there's an example of a network with almost solo projects or loose components, in which it makes it difficult to learn from each other. So there's the role of the TKE or RVO to connect the learning in those projects is much higher than at the left side in the development network, where the learning the research institutes play a major role in connecting and learning in this network. So this is one example to monitoring the progress and monitoring the building up of an innovation ecosystem over time. And it helps us to decide what to do, or what is needed to connect the projects more and more. And like we said in this presentation, the new projects are much broader, and that way we want to connect all those actors in the field in some bigger projects instead of many small projects. Well, this was my presentation about some elements we work on for monitoring the progress of mission innovation. And like as you see, it's more about elements instead of a broad and systematic method how we do this, and it's still work in progress.
But that was a very interesting perspective. Thanks a lot, because you might not think at first on this kind of monitoring the networks and the consortia. That's an interesting approach, I think, because it is, as you're saying, I think we have also the same analysis that this is a challenge in itself. It's also what we are trying with our joint programming platform Smart Energy Systems, where it is about these integrated regional energy systems, which is just one example. But here also we have the challenge: how can we involve the regional actors more, which is exactly one of these challenges. And to monitor the networks themselves, that's an interesting approach, I think, to see progress and if we are in the right direction. You highlighted also the role of the research institutes. I think that's something that we already experienced in the past, that they always had a major role in putting or bringing the consortia together. And for a time it was, at least in Austria, I think, mainly the focus on bringing the industry players on board. But now we are at another stage in the development, and the challenge is becoming much bigger in terms of not only bringing the technology providers on board for these innovation projects, but all these other stakeholders.
Okay.
So good that we have specialists like Klaus and Susanne that are that are also watching and contributing to our discussion here.
Yes, we see in the chat a question from Klaus. He says, Bill Gates, he warns against taking too small steps, so optimizing a system for 2030, which would not be aligned with the 2050 goals. How is this problem treated in your program? Maybe Joost, you can say something to that.
Wow, that's a big question. Yeah,
We're going big now.
It's a discussion for almost 20 years in transition theory. I think it's about doing a transition by niche or niches and connecting niches, and in that way scaling up, or just put some very large projects instead. And I think it's a good question, but it's a political answer. You need a political answer. Are we prepared as a country to invest largely in hydrogen, for example, to instead of other resources or other energy carriers, or do we take small steps and see how we can get how it will go? I don't know.
Yeah.
It's the most interesting question in transition theory, I think. But well,
shall I give
is
a
not
more
easy.
concrete answer, Joost? I'll try to make it a bit more concrete. First of all, Bill Gates comes from IT, and he is used to business cycles of 2 to 3 years. Now, in energy, you're speaking of at least 10 years, maybe more. So he has a different perspective. I just would like to highlight it's a learning curve, and how that went in my experience in the solar perspective. When I started in 2008, then the expectation was that solar could be integrated into the electricity grid up to 12-15% before a major system change would be necessary. And that was based on I think, a rather simple calculation. And it turned out that Germany ran into problems already at 5% integration of solar into the grid. And in the Netherlands, we thought that because we have a relatively strong electricity grid, that would take maybe a little bit longer. Now, solar is never distributed evenly into the grid. So we ran into problems a few years ago already on a regional level with 2% of solar penetration in the grid. So that just shows that it's very difficult to know and predict the future Bill Gates is talking about in 2050. But it's something, we need tools for this. And we cannot, I think, continue with these relatively simple scenarios where we're dealing that are based on trends and simply extrapolating trends into the future. So we have 2% solar, and then we have 10, and then that's not how it's done. Now, that was understood, but we still are in need of those decision-making tools. You can also call them simulations. We have a Hazy lab in the Netherlands that is capable of doing real-time, very large, almost the entire country. They can simulate real-time with simple what-if questions. And I think that's part of the program also at the European level that's been not addressed completely. And that will solve a few of the issues looking into the future. So my solution and my answer to that question would be having more forward-looking simulations and not stick to the old scenario making as is done until now.
Yes, Michael, I see in the chat that Klaus Kubersko asked to say something, and we had.
We will check back with the technical team because we advertised this in our intro video. So if we can make that happen, while we are discussing this, maybe we can also take Susanne's input on board in the discussion. We've also done some network analysis in the Driving Urban Transition Partnership, or in the preparation process for this partnership, came to the same conclusion, more or less, when it comes to demonstrations or labs, the network is fragmented. And her conclusion is in the next comment that the program level activities are needed to connect projects. Yeah, I mean, you had this with the warming up phase, which I think is a little bit of another level where you say, okay, let's bring people or different actors together, and then let's see what projects come out of this. What Susanne is proposing here, I think, is the other end. When you have the projects already out there, then you can try to connect them and work together. And what we are also doing on our platform, like trying to get strategic knowledge out of their work as soon as possible. Are you also working actively with the projects that you are funding then in a kind of, don't know, knowledge community or whatever you call it? Are you doing network activities with them or?
Yes, but in the Netherlands it's we do that as RVO, but it's also a task for the TKI's. And just on this issue, I have a reflection session organized with the director of the TKI Urban Energy next week, exactly on this issue. How can we connect the demonstration and living labs better than we do now? Because the role of they have a major role in doing so, but it's very hard to do it because there are more commercial aspects on this, and it's also a time problem because well, as an RVO we work with on the next tenders and the next programs and on mission innovation getting in hand. And well, if I'm honest, then knowledge learning and knowledge sharing is part of how you say it in the need. We can do more.
Yeah.
We have to do more. We must do more because well, as a policy agency, we have to get the most out of our money, and you get the most out of your money, especially in demonstration. If the learning is contributed or is shared among society instead of only the people who are working on the project itself. So it's an issue.
The case? Yeah. But isn't it the case that we are all struggling on the national level to find somehow the commitment for this, because it's always considered somehow as money that you don't provide to the stakeholders, but you're using for something else somehow. But on the other hand side, looking from it from another perspective, it's not so much money, and you can have a huge effect with this. The most steep learning curve that I had with this was the German e-energy program some years ago, where Ludwig Karg and his team played a major role to do this accompanying program management, and they really made it, to me, very impressive job in trying to bring those, because that were large projects in Germany that were focusing on smart grids. but not only R&D, but really showing how it can work. So there were always, it were really huge projects. And they brought them together, and more or less they became national agenda settings in this over a couple of years, because in thematic working groups, they were really able to, from these experiences they made in the projects, to discuss cross-cutting topics like be it interoperability or security concepts and all these kind of things. And here we learned a lot also for what we are trying to do in our joint programming platform on the European level now with the integrated regional energy systems. But of course, on a transnational level, it's much more difficult because you don't have this clear policy framework that you can address. So you have, again, a multiple framework environment, which makes it a little bit more difficult. But on the other hand side, if we can connect to the European level, that also could create some benefits to link the worlds. We have Klaus here now, one of our first guests. We did this advertisement from the beginning of the series, but until now, no one was so brave to step into this and say, okay, I come on stage. Thanks, Klaus, for doing this. A very good experience. You wanted to discuss something. Yeah. Please bring it on.
Thanks all of you, Otto, Joost, Gerdy, for your presentations. Good to see what's going on in the Netherlands as well. I just want to relate to Otto what you said. Bill Gates is an IT guy. I mean, first of all, this is not bad in the context of smart grid transition, all that. But he's really thinking long term. I mean, in his new book, How to Avoid Climate Disaster, he is really outlining impressively, in my view, what I had to learn over the last 20 years, just as my main job. And he, although he is a nerd, I mean, he's a freak like most of us who have an engineering background. So in that sense, he might underestimate the social dimension and complexity of the whole thing. But I think he's right in what he's saying, and Otto, what you said, yeah, it is politics has to give the directions, and much clearer, in my view, than they give now. In so many projects that we are working on and foresight processes, the dilemma is that if you don't have a clear view on how the energy system should look like what I was indicating with this, so if we want to move from natural gas to hydrogen, if we just now think about 10 years about how can we get everything on 5% level, that just won't help. Because it might be that we have completely to change also the tubes or whatever. I don't know what the solution
But it means, Klaus, that you support what Bill Gates is saying, that we should be careful not to run short in the goals we're setting.
Yeah, and maybe we have to still do more forward-looking exercises, but make clear to the policy that if they don't give direction, then all the programs, the RTI programs that we're doing, might go in the complete wrong direction.
Yes.
I think, and before we step into a detailed discussion on this, I would propose that we pick that up also for our next topic, because our final topic for today that the presenters that you said was the European perspective. And maybe as Klaus has joined, Klaus, stay with us as you are very active also on the European level, so we can have this discussion together, I think. But maybe we, as I understand, we get some input presentation for this also from Otto. And I just want not to go too long with this discussion, because we won't maybe miss this presentation at the end. So rather maybe have the additional input from Otto. And if you can be not too long, Otto, maybe then we have still some room to have this discussion about the role of policy, but also combined with the question, okay, what does that mean not only on a national but also on a European level?
Yeah, thanks, Michael. Yeah, what I hear a lot of when we try to propagate international collaboration is, it's comparing pears and apples. Each country is different. In Spain, it works differently, and you cannot compare. Well, I think if you do that in a structured way, you can. Not only on a more abstract level, of course, but I will try to show that. Gertie, next, please.
I think very interesting first picture, Otto, as it also happens that people are talking about pears and apples, but they're showing completely different things on so this is another level of complexity.
Yes, I think we're trying to put you on the right footing. I think you have to lose a bit your perspective and put on different glasses now and then. And let's try to do that in this short section. Gertie? Just a reminder again of a changing perspective, putting technology into context and involving owners. And if you do that, the problems are very different. Ownership that usually highlights bottlenecks in the innovation system. So just a quick reminder there of mission innovation policy. Next, please. Right. In Europe specifically, I think diversity should be a strength and not a weakness. You can hear that a lot. With so many member states, 30 and associated members, and it's almost impossible to work together. I think that's a gross exaggeration, and let me start just analyzing that a little bit. First, there are some no-brainers, easy things, and I hope I'm in line with Bill Gates here, where we have to work together with European countries, like shared infrastructure. Without, for example, hydrogen infrastructure, there is no hydrogen market. So that's a no-brainer. And now here comes the tricky bit, and I just wonder if Bill Gates addresses that in his book, which I have not read. So just forgive me if I'm completely out of line here. But then there are the not so easy areas of cooperation between member states and regions, and those concern streamlining the value chain in Europe. I think that's an important one. Also, if you look into the international picture outside of Europe, how do we deal with that? And there you have involved some issues like not just geopolitical issues, but also life cycle analysis, carbon footprint, etc. And another one is scaling up markets. So not only having a technology push from traditional technology push, but also at the same time having this market pull, and that's a tricky one because that's all about timing. But these are two major learning curves that are often overlooked in national and European calls. Those two learning curves you will find in this slide on the left side when we look at innovation system analysis, and I think that's the perspective we have to adopt, also to make clear where we come from as a region or member state, and also to understand the other countries. What is the context of a specific technology? Now, we do this analysis on a national level, and this methodology could, of course, be expanded to a European level. I have not seen too many studies on that, by the way. There's just one slight problem. If the funding comes from your national instruments, then the status of such an analysis and your contribution to a European innovation system is debatable because you have to comply with national requirements and conditions. Well, but I think that's an interesting point and something to discuss. And my recommendation would be for member countries to benchmark more often and specifically look at similar countries that do different things and very different countries that somehow do similar things. So that would be my kickoff for international perspective and how to collaborate with each other instead of competing all the time for scarce resources and scarce market access. That would be the end of my introduction.
Very good. Yeah, an interesting topic that you're raising at the end of our discussion, and I think also something where Klaus will have to contribute something. I guess I don't have specific questions at the moment, but maybe from the others.
Yeah, well, just I'm hesitating because we had a few concluding slides, and I'm aware that we're not presenting them now, but it's probably a good moment now to discuss this.
But thanks for calling this up, Gary. So I will reserve another 5 minutes or so for the end.
Yes, that's fine. That's fine.
Okay, good. I will keep an eye on the time.
It's just 2 slides. What's important, of course, I think, is what Otto highlighted. You don't exactly know what the status of the technology will be in 2050. We are innovating some technologies that will be much more common and much more demonstrated in 5 years' time are not in the models yet. So this is also a step-by-step process where you try to adapt your to aim your policies as good as you can to make sure that there's no lock-in, but you can't exclude it. And at the same time, you will have to keep your eyes open for new innovations. I'm personally involved in this heat storage issue, and what we're seeing is that this is rarely taken into account in the models at all. So if it's not there, if it's not in the input, it will certainly not be in the output. So, so the results of innovation will also play a role in taking that next step. But I agree that you have to take a wide perspective if you're looking at what you need to do now. It's a wicked problem, as you say, in mission-oriented innovation theory, I think, yes. Because there is so much that influences the outcome that you cannot steer this without feedback loops.
Yeah. Gerdy, I just also in response to Klaus, I think there's one important dimension missing from our energy scenarios, and that is adaptation to climate change. 2050 is not that far away, but still climate change can have a major impact. And then what will happen to your planning? What will happen to hydropower and storage in Europe? What will happen to agricultural systems, the need for drinking water, etc. I don't think most countries have been planning for those circumstances yet. Mm-hmm. In the Netherlands, the main context is that we are also sinking because a lot of these low countries is peat, and we're faced with drying, of course, also in the season, in the summer season, and then we face this major problem of sinking as a country. So, and we have to stay wet. So that will require some energy and resources in the next 30 years. Over to you.
Some reflections from Joost or from Klaus on this?
Well, I learned, like Matsukato says, innovation is politics, and you need both
That's
governments.
what Klaus also said, I think.
Yes, you need both governments to lead the way. And well, we in Holland, we are in a liberal society, and the markets has to choose instead of the government. So I think that's the main issue here. If you want to scale up like we have to, then someone has to decide what do we do? All electricity, all hydrogen, or anything. But well, it's not on the political agenda, I think, and not in the political culture to do this. So
Yeah, good point. But I think what we also, yeah, what I think we also can say here is, and here I have to take the head of a ministry that is now also not our department, but our ministry responsible for energy policy. And what I think, and here I'm referring to Klaus Kopeczko also, I mean, in the discussions that we had during the last 10, 15 years, we always saw that it's also somehow a dialogue process. If I think particularly maybe on these regulatory topics that we had, and can we move into regulatory sandboxes? What we had over a long time, we had these calls from the smart grids community that regulation needs to be changed. But if you go then into the detail, then you see, okay, there is no one voice that comes from, you know, the innovation projects and tells you exactly what to do. And here the problem, I think, is that we need this dialogue. And this is exactly where I'm also always after with this monitoring processes that we are having with our projects, to what we call the strategic knowledge. So can we learn with the projects, together with the projects, as much as possible about what is the status of knowledge, how can we set the frame at the moment to have, on the one hand side, no regret strategies, and not lock into something where we in 5 years then understand, oh, that was the wrong direction, and we cannot go back. But leave it open again, and on the other hand side, give guidance enough or open the framework enough so that innovation can happen. So I think this call from the research sector that there needs to be a guidance from the policy is somehow correct. I would support that. But at the same time, I have to say, yes, but we have to go into a dialogue. And what needs to be understood is how to arrange this dialogue, because it's not so easy to set the framework, the political framework. What should you say? I mean, are we there to say what is the one and only technology? No, we are not. So what is the guidance then that we can give policy on the fly, because we have now 10 years to go, and I mean to reach the goal. So we have to speed up the dynamics of this dialogue. Also, we cannot have this dialogue in 5-year cycles and then say, okay, let's have another look in 5 years where we are. No, we need to learn on the fly with the projects, set the framework right, and take the next steps and learn together, right?
Just Michael, just to you have a trump card in your hands, because the CETP consists of many member states, and there is less chance we get it wrong all of the time, everybody. So if you
hopefully,
there will be some member states who get it more right than others. So I think that part of the CETP to address this issue, this forward-looking issue, is to really benchmark and have this technology innovation perspective on a European and a national level to learn from other countries that may be a bit more advanced, and not stay in a defensive position, say, different countries do things completely different, and we cannot learn from that. And that, unfortunately, that has happened. At the same time, you have to caution. You cannot go into exaggerations like Germany gave a very good example with stimulating the solar sector. Yes, they did, but in a very German context, which could not be repeated so easily
That to
or
me
wisely in other countries. So
good point, and to me it refers back to what Gerdi says at the very it has said at the very beginning. If we should not, I mean, we should learn, but everyone has to take the learning and implement it themselves. We are not after harmonizing everything.
Exactly.
And let's not spend time on this, but let's take the learnings and transform it into how we can use those learnings. Before we go into the final 5 minutes where you want to present also your conclusions, I just want to pick up one thing from the chat that Emina posted. The mission-oriented approach need to be integrated into the CETP. It's a challenge, but we still need to integrate it in the two partnerships, CETP and DO2P. And I think we are on a good way here, as you know that we have already managed to formulate our SRIA in a way that is challenge-driven. I mean, we always have to understand what mission and challenge-driven means in that sense, but at least we have managed to break it down to RDI challenges, which I think is already a step forward in that direction. The DUTP, I think, has a certain more chance to be more mission-oriented, as the mission is very clear and focused on the built environment and the energy positive districts and these kind of things, while we are very broad with the kind of technologies and system integration aspects that we have to cover. But I think it's something that we really have on the radar. Having said this, I really want to move into the very last presentation of your conclusions, which will be then already more or less the final words in this session. But please take your time.
Yes, well, I saw that Klaus, he raised his hand in
I
Greek.
think you wanted to say goodbye. So thank you, Klaus, for stepping forward on stage. It was nice to have you.
Okay, then for some brief conclusions, just to wrap it up, the lessons learned from our experience with the MOI is that the challenge-driven approach has really been helpful to focus on solutions rather than on technologies, and bring together cross-sectoral multidisciplinary teams. We think that's important. Concerning impact monitoring and Netherlands in CETP, we have been addressing this already. It's work in progress. And the take-home messages, or stay-home messages if you want, it's important to build these mission-driven approach from identifying the societal challenges. And these are not limited to CO2 reduction, but can also include fair transition, energy independence, etc. Addressing system-level challenges require multi-stakeholder interaction. We think that that's really a cornerstone of what we're trying to achieve when we want to have mission-oriented progress. Both challenge-oriented and technology-oriented can well collaborate in the Clean Energy Transition Partnership in a challenge-driven approach, and let's explore this together. So this was my final remark for today, I would say. Thank you.
Thank you, Gerdi. That's perfect for summing up and finalizing this session. I just want to add one word from our co-moderator, Fredrik, who could not be with us today, but at least managed to watch the show and contribute via the chat. And he's saying, interesting discussion. We often talk about exponential development in markets and technology, but really about exponential political development. How do we prepare for exponential policy development? To me, this is, at the end, what we want to achieve. We want to, on the one hand side, push the solutions forward, but we also want to create strategic knowledge with our initiatives that can help policy to get the framework right. And I think this is a very important aspect that we can take away from today. Of course, if we want to be mission oriented, we need to push solutions, further solutions. We need to monitor if we are on the right track, and we have to help policy guide and frame so that we can do it and we have the corridor right for the development. Thank you, everyone. We are at the end of our today's session. Thank you, Joost, Otto, and Gerdi for your presentations. It was very interesting to learn about your approaches in the Netherlands, and we are very interested, I think, to further collaborate in our initiatives, particularly in the CETP, and learn more on this all about the mission and challenge driven approach together. Thank you very much. Have a nice day and a good weekend, and see you all soon.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Gary.